staff in kindergarten, first grade classes with paras. I am concerned by some of the things I've heard in Seek about it being difficult, given what we ask our paras to do, for them to complete their assigned duties within the time allotted. And so I think that the comparison data is good data, but and this goes to the time study that I know that you are all working on. I'm concerned not just with how we compare with other jurisdictions, but that we're fairly paying our paraprofessionals for the time that they spend working. And if we're asking them to do 8 hours of work, then we should pay them for 8 hours of time. And so I think this is good. I think it's good to know that we compare favorably to other jurisdictions. But I do think there's a question independent of how we compare to other jurisdictions, and that's how we use the paras. Thank you.
I will just sort of add, after speaking with the leadership of each of the schools, what I have heard from them is that the paraprofessionals' job duties as assigned are certainly within the scope of a 7.5-hour day. And anything beyond that can be flexed. And I think that we're trying to provide that ability to really think about, if you work an 8-hour day on a Monday and you need a half an hour off on a Friday, take that half an hour off, so long as you can meet your obligations.
And we will reach back out to Seek. Our intention was to share this data with them at our last meeting prior to now, but it was canceled due to an early release due to weather. So we will make sure we also loop back with Seek.
Any other questions or any other follow-up on any other topics we talked about so far? Okay. Thanks.
The next question has to do with our investment in psychologists, counselors, and social workers. So this too just provides a little bit of comparison data. So in our current year's budget, FY 2020, we added an additional psychologist. And then in our 2021 proposed budget, we've added an additional social worker. We didn't include it in this ratio, but the other thing that we have in this district that's also very helpful is we have 4 behavioral specialists that help in terms of student behavior. So when we look at the state ratios, the state doesn't specify any ratios for psychologists and social workers, but they do provide ratios for counselors across all schools. So when you look at the 2020 rates, the state had required 455 students to each counselor at elementary, 370 to 1 at middle schools, and 325 to high schools. And we are well below all of those rates. We have fewer kids to each counselor than that by far. As part of the governor's proposed budget for 2021, he is recommending decreasing the number of students per each counselor. So he recommended that elementary be decreased to one counselor for each 375 students, 1 counselor for each 325 middle school students, and he did indicate 1 position has to be at least 11 months, and then at high school, 1 position for each 300 students, with, again, just 1 position being 11 months. So we have fewer counselors than the state requires. But when we add them all together, I'll pull the chart up. And when we add them all together, we have 161.76 students per counselor, psychologist, and social worker combined. And then in this chart, what we've shown is we have our current ratio in the column to the left that says 2020, and then we've also included, when we add the additional social worker in 2021, how we compare. And it does reduce our ratio down from that 161.76 to 154.17. So one of the things that's interesting looking at this chart is it really does help you compare the variance, and you can really see how different districts have really picked kind of different mixes of counselors, psychologists, and social workers. So we hope this data is helpful. Obviously, it doesn't address all the questions in terms of support for students, but it does provide some comparison data.
And add a couple of things to that. One is this chart does not include the BCBAs, which are the behavior specialists that are in the schools. And these data also don't include the special education department leads, or special education leads at the elementary and at the middle school, elementaries and at the middle school, which also broker resources for students. So our ratios right now overall are very good. The last thing I would say is that this is exactly why you all, I think, are lobbying to ask the legislature to get rid of the support cap that was put in place. Because with the elimination of that support cap, more money becomes available for school counselors, school psychologists, school social workers, and the like. So hopefully, if that support cap comes off with the new proposal from the governor about some of the ratios, which we already actually exceed, some more dollars could flow in, and we could begin to look at, continuing to supplement social workers and psychologists and school counselors.
Yeah, I think it's great. We're definitely making progress. But I do, the state standards are, I think, on the whole, not where nationally, accepted best practices. I remember when I was running for a school board, I remember seeing that for the National Association of School Psychologists, I guess it was the ratio recommended was 1 to 500. I mean, now that's obviously a national, but I think freeing up having more money coming from the state to, I know that we've exceeded what the state says, but that's also not always what a nationally accepted best practice is. So it'd be great to have more funding coming from the state for that. But it's terrific to see private. I remember when you came in, that was one of the first things you did was hire another psychologist. So it's great to see that progress.
And this was the school social worker that we're proposing in the budget was on the unfunded list last year. And so being able to sort of pick some of these things off and be able to clear that unfunded list from last year has really been a positive.
Can I ask a question about the unfunded list? Does it automatically roll over, or you sort of look at it from year to year and things may drop off, or?
It's the latter. We revisit it every year to see if it's still a priority, see if it still matches sort of what the overall goals of the division are, and then how does it meet those division goals. But in this particular case, because we've been so focused on, social emotional learning and that caring community and culture, it carried over.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Whiting.
Much briefer this time. So I'm concerned about all of these, but I'm kind of less concerned about the counselors and more about the psychologists and social workers, and the sense as we've talked about before on the board, the issue that I think a lot of us worry about most with our kids is stress. Obviously there's drugs and all sorts of things like that and vaping, but I think the big challenge we've got is stress. And I think psychologists in particular and social workers are very important in that space. So, I'm not the person to tell the school administration exactly what the right ratios are. I just say that it's pretty important, I think, to adequately resource that from both an anti-bullying, a prevention of school violence, and an overall mental health approach for students. And so things like that are still on the unfunded list, like a psychologist intern. I saw that and I saw $21,000. Like, surely we can find $21,000. I mean, if that's something that's really valuable, I'd like to maintain a budget priority on mentally healthy school and graduating mentally healthy students.
We share that priority.
Ms.
I guess I would like to push us a bit further. I think school counselors and social workers is all very important, but I also think we need to, this is a very broad and deep problem, not just here in Falls Church, but across the country. Stress, anxiety, social emotional learning is very important, and I think it merits a larger discussion. I think we need to meet the students where they are, and I know we expect a lot of our teachers, and it is a really hard lift for them to incorporate everything into the classroom, but I think social emotional learning needs to be a part of our curriculum, and I would like us to give our teachers and administrators tools to implement this when they need it and incorporate it into our classrooms. I would like us to not have to refer students outside of the classroom to counselors and psychologists. If they really need it, yes, let's do that. But I would love to see us meet their needs where they are, because it's their teachers who see them every day who are in a position to know what have they assigned? Do they have a student who has an anxiety attack in class and what has provoked it? Because that teacher sees that student every day. And I know we ask so much of our teachers that adding one more thing on the plate really can be too much. But thinking ahead and planning ahead future years out, I would love to see us incorporate more social emotional learning consistently into our curriculum more broadly.
I think that would be a good topic for us to share some information about, maybe in an upcoming Friday update, because there are elements of a social emotional learning curriculum in every school currently, and we also are spending a lot of time working with our teachers on trauma-informed instruction and trauma-informed care. So maybe we could share some information just to put it out there so that everybody's aware.
And if I can add one more thing, I think in fall you talked about trying to have more schools, more staff be trained in youth mental health first aid, if there are ideas to do that.
Yeah, we were fortunate last year. Sort of our secret weapon on one of our secret weapons on the staff is Rebecca Sharp, and she was able to get the training for us for free, and so we're working to figure out a way to do that again. And if not, we're certainly open to paying for more training. But yes, we are working on getting more folks trained in mental health first aid.
Any other questions? Ms. Litton?
I know we've invested the most in counselors, and I don't want to discount what the role they play often with stress and anxiety. At least from what I've seen with my own high schoolers, that's the person they know. So that's often the person they go to first, that they feel comfortable with. And part of that is because the ratio, I think, has been so much smaller. But, I think it's really important to keep those counselor ratios low, because those are the people our kids are most connected with.
Any other comments or thoughts at this point? Just looking around the table to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Niharika, I wonder if you, on that last topic of student and sort of outreach with counselors, outreach with psychologists and other support staff, I don't know, wonder if you had any thoughts, but if not, just I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, I would just like to say that I agree with Ms. Litton. I think counselors do like a lot of the job of, training students, but also like keeping mind of their mental health and like schoolwork and everything. So I do go to my counselor whenever I need help with anything or like any issues I'm facing. So I think that keeping the counselor ratio low is a good idea, definitely. But just investing more, or just like training them also to outreach with students more, because they are the one person that we know, but I feel like not every student feels comfortable like going to them. So just like maybe teaching them to connect with us more, and then like telling students about the opportunities that we have, not only with the counselors but also with the school psychologists. Because I know for me, like me and my friends don't really know about our school psychologists. Like I didn't know about it until I like was in a meeting here. So just like making students aware of the people that they have, the people that they can go to for help would be really helpful in general. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Michael.
So question number 4 has to do with budget data. And I believe the data points we were looking for was FY18 actual expenditures, the 19 budget, the 19 actual expenditures, the 20 budget, our 20 end-of-year forecast, and the 21 proposed budget. So that data comes from both the budgeting and financial system. So we put together this chart that shows by object revenue and expenditures with each of those categories.
Very, very simple question. The column, one of the columns, the one third from the far right, says sum of FY 2021 end of year forecast. Shouldn't that be 2020 end of year forecast?
Yes, that should be 2020.
Thanks.
We will fix that.
Mr. Reitinger, I'll just ask, you were the one to sort of ask for this, I just, with that one correction, make sure that this is giving the kinds of